This is the I'm Possible Project show, where we interview real people who have achieved incredible feats in the face of overwhelming odds, showing that impossible is just a state of mind and that anything is possible. I'm your host, Joshua Rivedal. Today, in episode 35, Elijah's Journey and Other Approaches to Suicide Prevention, I talked to Efrem Epstein. Let's jump right in.
I've known F, I want to say for about 6 years and change, so for a little while, and he's just a fellow colleague in the mental health and suicide prevention world, and we first met in Brooklyn at a Out of the Darkness walk where I had a chance to kind of speak one of my first times, and we just crossed in so many different ways and so many different paths, and F has just been a huge friend to me while I'm on this journey, and maybe I'll leave it there. I mean, there's so many touch points, we might end up talking about it, but F, man, thanks for joining me on this interview. I'm really stoked to have you today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I remember I heard you speak. I know I think it was October 2011 in the local New York City AFSP walk, and then we were on a panel together, and you know, I have this thing for dates. I remember it was Monday. I believe it was Monday night, November 14th, 2011. We were on a panel together up at Yeshiva University. Their Active Minds chapter was having an event. The Yeshiva University Stern College Active Minds chapter. And we were both invited to be on the same panel there, and I remember we hit it off that night, and kind of been a huge bro fest ever since.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's so funny. Yeah, that was at Yeshiva, and it was actually, so that was one of the first colleges where I did my one-man show. That was probably the third or fourth, and I remember there was a sound glitch, and I felt so bad, and then it was you, me, and Dr. Chaim Nissel who got the chance to do the panel, and I felt so good about it, and I even have another memory where I forgot Dr. Nissel's name, and I just called him Doctor, and afterwards I said, "Hey, Chaim, I'm so sorry I forgot your name. I called you Doctor," and he's like, "I've been called worse." I thought that was so funny, and just such a funny little moment from him. And you guys both put me at ease because it was really in the beginning of this journey and this career in mental health and suicide prevention. So great memories there.
I appreciate it. And for people listening to this podcast, I know you're doing a bunch of podcasts, but people who might be listening to this specific one, it might be because I've shared the link, and so there's a good chance it's going to be the typical person listening to this might be more likely to be a part of the Jewish community than many of your other podcasts. And for that, I want to share that Josh, if it's okay if I say this, is not Jewish, but he is so amazing he despite that, or maybe in spite of that, when speaking to Jewish communities, Jewish-based faith communities, he speaks so eloquently and he connects so greatly with all of them. And here he was at Yeshiva University Stern College, basically speaking to a bunch of Orthodox Jewish college students, and he connected so greatly with all of them. And it's one of the reasons why I asked him to be on the advisory board of Elijah's Journey, the 501c3 I founded, focusing on suicide awareness prevention in the Jewish community, partially because I thought it was very important for us to have some voices outside the Jewish community on there. And Josh has such a knack for saying the words that people in the Jewish community need to hear. And so, if you're a member of the Jewish community, if you're working with a faith community out there, and you're looking for who can be a great speaker to bring to your synagogue or youth group or camp that really can connect with your youth or your adults about mental health issues, Josh is your person. And we're very excited that one thing led to another. A few years later, I was very excited I think I tipped over the first domino that led to a bunch of other dominoes of you doing your show at Columbia Barnard Hillel. And I know that the person who ended up doing that, who ended up bringing you there, Dana Kukin, also is one of your authors in the I'm Possible Project series. I know that she was very instrumental in bringing you there, but I think I can take the credit of introducing you to Dana and saying that the two of you really have a lot to talk about, and you did. And she ended up being one of your authors as well in the first book.
And she's a good friend too, actually, and I'm really glad that you made that connection. In fact, it was a year prior, so it would have been 2013, and I did my show at the Hillel in 2014, but in 2013, there was a violence against women, preventing violence against women event at Columbia, and Dana was kind of spearheaded it through Active Minds and the Hillel, and she just had an incredible story, and she was so brave, and I didn't even know that she shared her personal story, which is mirrored in the First Time Possible book. There, she shared it for the first time publicly, which I didn't know, but it was so powerful, and I connected to it so much, and we remain good friends. And that's kind of a cool byproduct. Like, I have all these little markers, I think, from different things and different people who you've connected me to over the years, and just certain little memories of speaking to a lot of Jewish communities. And I think, connecting to religious communities and faith-based communities is really important to me because of my dad, and my dad was super religious and, evangelical Christian. So like a lot of the Old Testament is very similar to the Torah and some of the prophetical books. And so I know that language and I understand it. And even though I don't adhere to it, like semantically speaking, like it's kind of how I live my life, but it's so important because it's a place where people connect, and it's a place where people draw strength. And my father tried to draw strength from that before he died by suicide. And unfortunately, his particular community did not embrace him until after he died. And so to me, it's like, that's why it's so important to get on this National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, their faith-based task force. And I'm so proud of the work we do with Elijah's Journey. I'm just an advisory board member, but I know I've consulted a little bit on some Seder documents and just kind of anything I can do to help. And I'm proud of your work. And I think actually this is kind of a good segue, because I'm kind of curious about your story, and this is really your interview, and I'm I love you, F, because you're such a connector, and you're always thinking about others. That we started off the episode talking so much about me, which is cool, which I dig, and I was actually back and forth, but I just want to give this opportunity for you to share your story, and so I can learn about you. I mean, I know a lot about you, but so we can learn more about you, and we can kind of show people the work that you've done and how you're living your life, and really what it means to be I'm Possible, and really what it means, because you're one of my authors, you're one of our authors as well in that First Time Possible book. So will you give us a little background on your life, where you've been, where you're going, the Efrem Epstein experience?
Efrem Epstein experience. So it's funny. I think I wrote it a couple of years ago, but I think the story I wrote for you, or the personal anecdote I wrote for you that's in the first book, I think I started off by saying, it's a struggle for me to find an angle to my story that I haven't spoken of beforehand, because I don't think it's fair to listeners or to people that are taking time to listen to me to hear the same story that I've told over and over again. First thing I want to say is that this past summer, or actually this past year, these past few months of 2017 have been very significant for me, because I went through a few struggles in my life, but what I call the struggle that really changed me and that really led me onto my current path and led me to be speaking with you was the struggle I went through in 2006. And if you're a calendar geek, you might know that in 2017 is the first time that those days and dates have matched up since 2006. So when I talk about going through a slide on Thursday, May 18th, 2006, well, this past year, May 18th was a Thursday. It was the first time it had been a Thursday since 2006. So these markers that I have sort of reemerged this year. And even though last year I made sort of a big deal to myself that, it's been 10 years since those events happened, this year it was also a little bit different, because this is the first time that May 18th being a Thursday, first time that July 14th being a Friday, and those are some important days for me in my struggles. So I went through, as I said, a very tough period in 2006. It's tough to say any one major trigger, but a bunch of minor triggers. But the short, I think I wrote this elsewhere, I kind of felt like a little bit like Charlie Brown, that I'd had one too many footballs pulled out from me. And I landed on my back one too many times. And that one last thud basically had me saying, I don't know I want to get back up again. I don't know if I can get back up again. I think I've tried kicking one too many footballs, and I don't want to be kicking footballs again for the rest of my life. And you know what? I'm happy or not happy, but I think the best answer for me is to just lay on the ground and look up at the sky, as Charlie Brown did, and maybe just stay in that position for the rest of my life. And that's kind of how I felt. And even during that 7-week period where I maybe said, you know what, I'll try to get up and try to walk and kicking a football. I'd get up, try to walk, and I'd then fall back down. That's kind of where I was in 2006. And I then started to wonder, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to metaphorically, I should probably say, get up, walk, and kick a football again, and perhaps not so metaphorically, and people who have been through tough struggles might appreciate this. There were aspects of it that were actually very painful physically. One of the things I say is that when you're going through something that resembles a depression, I say resembles because I may not have had a clinical diagnosis of depression, but sure enough, I mean, the symptoms, many of them were in line with what a clinical diagnosis would be. And, you know, I say it's almost as if your worst enemy has taken over your brain and used your brain against you. And says, yeah, guess what? I control all your nerve endings now. So you think you can fight up against this? Boom, there's some pain in your leg. There's some pain in your arm. You're trying to basically think positive thoughts. You're trying to rally against this. Well, guess what? Boom, here's some negative thoughts in your brain. I'm in control of your brain now. And really, it's coming out of it is when you feel like, you know what? I may still have some things to figure out, but thank goodness I'm at least somewhat control of my inner workings again. So somewhere in between that May 18th and July 14th. July 14th is when I really consider myself really fully coming out of that dark period, Friday, July 14th, 2006. There was a day, I believe it was July 8th of 2006, I found myself, it's a long story, but I found myself on the campus of Rutgers University. The short is I was trying to see what other avenues I could have to basically jumpstart my life, including possibly some additional graduate programs. It was a very rainy day, and I remember at one point just looking up to the sky and saying, God, you know, just get me out of this dark period. I promise I won't forget it. After July 14th, when God kept God's part of the bargain, I said, you know, it's time for me to keep my part of the bargain, and I wasn't really sure how I was going to do that. I started sharing my story a little more publicly. I sought advice from some friends, including rabbis, saying, you know, what do I do from here? And a really good friend gave me some advice, said, don't rush it. It will come to you. I got involved with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which getting involved with that gave me many gifts, including that it ultimately led me to being exposed to you for the first time. And one of the things that ended up happening a few years later, I'd become very close with the then New York City director of AFSP, and she invited me to attend World Suicide Prevention Day at the UN, which happens every September. And I was there for that day, hearing in September 10th, 2009, hearing all these amazing stories of suicide awareness prevention initiatives around the globe in various communities, in the elderly community, in the LGBT community, in the English as a second language community, in the immigrant community, in the elderly community. And I remember thinking in my head, you know what, I think there's room for really a need for an initiative focusing on suicide awareness prevention with the nuances of the Jewish community in mind. And later that day, the idea for Elijah's Journey was born. Ultimately, I decided to name the project Elijah's Journey a few months later. And then in 2011, we officially received our 501c3. And so that's sort of the short version of how that got started. And for those that don't know, the name Elijah's Journey comes from 1 Kings chapter 19. A lot of people might be familiar with some of the stories of Elijah the prophet in the Bible or from Passover, but 1 Kings chapter 19 is a little lesser known, and I really think that it's good reading for anybody who's struggling, whether they're religious or not. Chapter 18 is basically the background. Elijah basically confronts the prophets of the Baal at Mount Carmel, and the short is he's up against, I think, 400 prophets, and he wins. His miracle wins. Basically, all the people even the people that have been worshiping the Baal, start worshiping God again. Elijah's the hero, and it's really looking good for him. He has a very good day in chapter 18. And then in chapter 19, Queen Jezebel hears about what happens, and she says to Elijah, yeah, I'm going to kill you tomorrow. And then in verse 4, he basically says, he asks God to take his life. And God's response is to tell him to go on a 40-day journey and then reassess the situation. And that's where the name Elijah's Journey comes from. And just one additional little rub of that story. when Queen Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you tomorrow, some of the commentators ask the obvious question, well, she could have killed him right then and there. Why did she kill him right then and there? And one commentary that I read is that she knew, or she believed, that the people worshiping God was temporary, and that they'd go back to worshiping the Baal within a day. And so what she's basically saying to him there is, I could kill you now, but if I kill you now, you're going to die thinking you're some sort of great hero. So I'm going to wait 24 hours just so you can live long enough to see what a failure you really are, and then I'll kill you. And I think that sort of resonates a little bit with people, with the narrative of many of us who struggle as well.
Dude, lots of questions, lots of interesting material, and I think it's just incredible, first of all, that you went through this period and then you made this deal with God, and as usual, God holds up, kind of what he needs for us to do or to learn or whatever. And so that's what happened. And then you kept your part of the bargain too. And out comes Elijah's journey, which is incredible. Obviously, I know a lot of the work being done with that. You turned a lemon into lemonade. You kind of turned like, I'm just thinking like miracles, like holy lemons in the lemonade. Like if it was more Christian, it'd be like a holy lemonade, holy water. But like, we can't do that.
Thank you. I mean, a couple of things. I'm sorry. A couple of things I should probably put out there, just to somebody hearing this doesn't get the wrong idea. There are many, many times that I've tried to make deals with God, or first off, a lot of I would say, quote unquote, making a deal with God is probably not the right. I'm not sure if that's the way that I want to look at it, and I think a lot of people would say that's very theologically problematic. And I would say that there are many things, perhaps most things that I've said that I've tried to ask for, or even maybe like bargain with God. It doesn't always turn out the way that I've asked for. As I'd say, the overwhelming majority of the time I won't. So I just want to be careful, because I have a feeling there might be people listening to this. Why did God answer Efrem's prayers and not mine? And believe me, it's hardly the case that every single thing that I pray for is granted. And so I'd say more often than not, it's not. In this case, I did seriously call out to could God help me get out of the situation? And the truth is that I did get out of it. And I did feel, you could look at it as we made a deal, but I could look at it as more along the lines of that I felt that I had an obligation to give back. And I think I still do, and I do my best to live up to that obligation. I don't want to say that could I do more. I think I can always do more. I think there are probably times where I may not be able to do every single thing I want to do, but I do see that it's part of the process. And you know what? I've also gained a lot out of this as well, in addition to feeling that I'm giving back in a way that I probably could and should give back. So I wanted to clarify that, partially also because I know there are probably many people listening to this that are struggling and may have called out to God before, and it's tough. I mean, I remember one of the first mornings I was struggling. I think it was like Sunday, May 21st. There's a certain prayer that it's traditional to say when you wake up in the morning. For those listening that are familiar with it, the Moda Ani, where you thank God for basically waking up your soul after you've been asleep. And I remember starting to say it that morning, and then I basically in the middle, I punched my wall and basically said, "Why am I saying this? I'm not happy I woke up." So it's tough. It's complex. And as much as I like telling the narrative of June 8th and that I was able to come out of this, I want to very much caution that it's rarely that easy. It's rarely that linear. And while it may sound like it was easy and linear for me, it was not, and it still isn't.
F, I'm glad you clarified that, because though we don't necessarily share the same faith, we both have faith, and there's a couple things to that. First of all, I think, when we pray for stuff, even if it's like as a last resort and we're treating God as a genie, I think sometimes we forget that sometimes a no is an answer. Sometimes radio silence is an answer. And there's still, what we want isn't always what we need. And it's like, I don't know, like sometimes in my head, in just my head, because I've got so many swirling thoughts, but sometimes I feel like God is like the greatest showrunner, television showrunner, of course, in all of history, because when you're writing a character, you often, to create drama or whatever, not that God's trying to create drama, but like often the character, the protagonist, doesn't get what they want. They get what they need, and I don't know, life is like that. Of course, like we don't always get what we want, but we a lot of times get what we need, and a lot of times we don't. You know, a lot of times we don't, and a lot of it is about reframing certain experiences. I don't want to include traumatic experiences into that because those oftentimes are forced upon us. So it's different commentary. But when I was going through my suicidal period, there's some congruency to your experience with God and with mine, and sometimes I call God the universe, and sometimes I call God or higher power. But I was praying, and I wanted God to connect me to positive people and positive thoughts and positive experiences. And I repeated that a bunch, and then there was days where I would repeat that. The main time I was asking for that was when I needed to first reach out for help after I stepped back from that fourth floor window, and I took a risk, called my mother, who I wasn't on good terms at the time, but God answered that, the universe answered that prayer, and I needed support in that moment. And part of, I think, I've been telling people lately, part of my debt to God or the universe, and it's a good debt, it's not an unhealthy thing or God's holding a vig over my head, but it's more like I'm kind of doing what you're doing, more in a secular way. So I think, I'm just kind of relating to you on that. Who, coming out of this really dark period in your life back in 2006, who did you count, if anybody, as support system, or who or what? Because I find support systems are so huge when going through these traumatic experiences, especially like a major depressive episode or, a period of suicidality. So who or what did you count as your support system during that period?
So obviously I can name several individuals that were helpful, both family members, non-family members, even people who I didn't know very well, but saw me posting about it and said, I want to connect with you on this. But really, and I think it's still true today, it's really communities that I think are supportive. I'm a big believer of the power of healing through communities, and sometimes communities, just by being communities, are very, very important. I mean, I'm very privileged to belong to a couple of really, really good faith-based communities on the Upper West Side of Manhattan that have been very supportive of me, both in my struggles and just in terms of my general growth in my human being, and as well as just providing me a good network for which I can just enjoy life, too. Sometimes a community is supportive, not necessarily by not by necessarily giving you hugs or by necessarily being there to do all the wonderful things that you need them to do at one time, even though those are important, but just by being a place where people are just providing you a source of joy and just being a place where you know what, I know I can go there, and I know that when I go there, I'm going to be happy. One of the things, and we could talk for hours about this, one thing which is actually kind of recent, really in the past couple of years, that's been a great source of growth for me is about a year and a half ago, I joined a choir here in New York, and you know what? I've always been a fan of music. When I was very, very young, before my voice changed, I sung in my elementary school choir. I kind of moved away from that after my voice changed. Still sang here and there with lead services on the Jewish high holidays, but was not really an avid singer. And I wasn't sure I was ever going to be in that place again. And then sort of on a whim, I'd heard about this choir. It's called the Gotham Rock Choir in New York City. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go and check them out. And I ended up joining them. And gosh, it's really, I'd never realized how much, not just how much I'd missed singing, but how important it was for me in terms of my growth, including my mental health growth. You know, after I was singing with them for a few months, my therapist was saying that they noticed major changes in me. They noticed that my eye contact improved. They noticed that I was being more present, and they just had noticed several other things about me of which I give this whole process a lot of credit for. I think I told my choir director, I said, I'm still not sure I understand what music therapy is, but I know I believe in it. It's kind of interesting. We're doing a show next week, although it'll probably be after the show will probably already pass by the time this airs, at the Players Theater in New York City, a place that I know is very, very close to you, because that's where I believe you did your off-Broadway run of your shows in 2014. Right. And I'm a big believer in the power of music, and also, there's so many ways to bond with people, but there is something unique about the bonding that comes when you sing with people. It is something so intimate. It doesn't matter how well you know them. It doesn't matter that you could be on the opposite end of the room of them, but there just is something so powerful about singing with people that just, it's so therapeutic. And so going back to being present, I think that's one additional way that has really helped me a lot on there. I think one, it's hard to say that my struggles were due to item A, item B. Sure, we can look at the micro things that were affecting me at the time or affecting me in the past. We can try to draw some big themes there, but if I had to break it down to one or two things and say, what can we learn from here? I think that for most of my life, I'd spent a lot of time looking back at the past and saying, why couldn't things be this way? Why can't I go back in time and change A, B, C, or D? If only I could do that. If only I hadn't made that mistake yesterday or 3 years ago. How could things be different today? And when I wasn't doing that, I was spending time angsting about the future. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen tomorrow or 2 years from now or 3 years from now? I was spending virtually no time saying, here's where I am at the present. And you know what? I'm at the present right now. What can I do? What can I learn from the past to basically make this present moment as great as possible? And that may mean taking a glimpse back at the past saying, that was a great thing I learned from, or that was a great thing I enjoyed. So I'm going to incorporate that into my decision at the present. And, or, that was something that I probably, if I had to do again, I would have avoided. Okay, I'll avoid that at the present and use that to set up the future. And I wish I could give that as a roadmap in terms of how that can work for everybody. But I'd say that if you're looking for an end goal, if you can work on that, you're going to be a lot better set up to really maximize your happiness, maximize your satisfaction in the present, and that makes everything better. And I'd say that it's obviously not something that you can just pick up by saying you want to do it or by somebody telling you, but when that happened organically, and when that happened, it took a while for me to get there, but since that's happened, I'd say that so much of my life has changed for the better.
I'm glad that you brought all that up, because initially I asked about support system coming out of your suicidal period in 2006, and really cool to hear about those social supports and all that. But then you brought up music, and music is so new for you, and I like that because we have to constantly be developing our bag of tools as coping skills. And so you have this music piece, which is so great. I mean, music is has been such a big part of my life, doing musical theater, Broadway stuff, writing music and all that. And I'm a big fan, especially when I go speak and talk to students and talk just about anywhere, and they ask either what was one of the components of what helped me come out of my period of suicidality, or how do I cope on the daily, and it's creativity. And music is part of that. I mean, I'm a writer, I journal, but part of one of my coping skills is sometimes singing, playing the piano, very mediocre, of course. But that also, what's cool about that, I'm listening, and it ties into your piece about community too, because I mean, you could be a solo artist, but you're talking about singing in a choir. So there's a sense of community, throwing music on top of it. And I'm sure there's a few other positive support and reasons why that's such a great coping skill for you. But I love to hear that. I think that's going to be a really encouraging piece for our listeners. I'm curious. I think this will be like the last big question, and I have something else I want to go into, but you could have chosen anything. I know you're or not a member, but you were part of the Jewish community secularly and religiously, and you saw the need for suicide prevention inside the many sects and denominations of the Jewish faith. But why? I have some ideas, obviously, but I'm curious because I think I want Jewish and non-Jewish listeners to really understand, like, why would you create something so niche for such a niche audience? What's the need there? Why, is it not being addressed? Is it being addressed too much, too little? Like, what's your reasoning behind that? And let's go from there.
Okay, so I have a few answers to that question. First off, to clarify, it's probably not the only, or it's definitely not the only niche that I'm interested in. Sure. I know that you and I have done some work together on mental health in the workplace. I've also, I think that you and I are talking about doing some stuff on mental health in music itself, as well as mental health and a bunch of other things. And we're both on the Faith Communities Task Force as well. I'd say it was the one that I started with largely. I think there are some obvious answers. Maybe one of the not so obvious answers is that going back to that September 10th day, I was hearing all these things about mental health in various other sectors, and a couple of things I want to point out that I didn't mention there. A number of the people that were presenting that day at the UN themselves happened to be Jewish. And I realized that there are many people very involved in mental health advocacy who happen to be part of the Jewish community. And I asked them afterwards, I said, have you ever thought about starting something like this? And they said, yeah, I have, and it's really needed. So if you start it, I'll be involved, and many of them did become involved initially. And the other thing was that one of the people who basically was presenting that day, actually on suicide awareness prevention in the elderly, was somebody not Jewish, a major thought leader in the mental health world. But he opened up his presentation quoting Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Most of your Jewish listeners will probably recognize that name. And I really said, wow, that's a sign. So the answer, is it being addressed? I don't think we have enough time for me to fully answer that question because it's not a simple yes or no. I think that there are many good people out there who care a lot about social justice, that this is on their radar. I think that I will say what I keep saying a lot. What I keep saying a lot is that there are a lot of wonderful communities out there doing wonderful social justice programming in many areas that are needed, like poverty and like race relations and equality, and basically advocating for communities that are in need or that are oppressed. I think that they have it in their mind that we should be doing that obviously mental health advocacy and mental health care is important as well too. I'm not sure there is the greater awareness yet in terms of how important this is and the priority that it should be and could be. And I think, and this is something that you and I know have talked about before as well too, I think that the general mental health community, and this goes back to some of the curriculum that we've talked about as well too, can help their own cause better by coming up with better messaging and better curricula that really paint this with messages of hope and with messages of how this connects. Because when you can give a message of social justice that here's a direct action you can do, and here's a way that you're going to make the world a better place, and here's a way that there's ending with a message of hope, rather than this is a sad thing that we really don't know what to do other than be sad about it, I think that you're much more likely to get action in the first case and much more likely to get the partnerships that you want. And I should say this again, Jewish communities, I think all faith-based communities could, in theory, be doing social justice 24/7. They could probably pick one issue of social justice and do it 24/7. I think that we could talk about poverty 24/7 and we still wouldn't solve the issue. So that's really, when we're saying we want you to devote some time to mental health advocacy, we're really saying, unfortunately, you need to take time away from something else. And I think that there are things we can do to better make that push. I think that that's one of the things that we're trying to do with Elijah's Journey and with the Faith Communities Task Force is to work on some curriculum, like the Stater document, where we say this fits organically into what you were going to talk about anyway. So why not talk about it here?
Yeah, it's really important. It's just another community, and I mean, you can slice and dice the community up in a lot of different ways. But I just wanted to hear it from you about why you started it. What part of that's important? Because we share different reasons why the work is important. But you're the founder, and I'm so glad that you are and that we are doing that work. F, I want to change gears a little bit. I know you in a very professional way, but I also know you in a fun way. And our listeners don't quite know you as much in that fun way, even though we've had a good time chatting. So this part of the interview is called the Quickfire Round, and it's really kind of like our Inside the Actors Studio, which oddly enough I was watching this morning with Lipton and Dave Chappelle of all people. It was a good interview. But this is just a little quick one. There's no right or wrong answers. Going to have some fun with it so people can see a different side of you, dude. So ask, man, what is your spirit animal?
What's my spirit animal? I want to say the eagle because I'm a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. But for some reason, an animal, even though it's on a somewhat rival team that I've always identified with somehow, is a dolphin.
No, you're the second person who's been on the show who said dolphin.
Yeah, there's just something about it. I think it's just. I want to say that they're so positive and friendly. It turns out that I think dolphins aren't nearly as friendly as they have a reputation of being. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about dolphins that I think are kind of cool.
Yeah, man. Well, they're mammals, and they're really smart. They're one of the only animals in the animal kingdom that mate for love, like human beings. So there's something there. I like the eagle for you too, the bald eagle. But
so let's go with some sort of hybrid between an eagle and a dolphin.
The deagle. Or the
eagle. Yeah. Or dolphin for anything that's not related to football, or maybe something along those lines.
Love it. That's kind of a fun one because it could be anything. But what are you terrible at?
What am I terrible at? I'll say two things. One is cooking, and I don't know if I'm really terrible at cooking, but I just don't think I'll ever have the patience to really work myself to be good at it. And another thing, I've never been good at riding a bicycle. You know, now I live in the city, I don't drive anymore, so I'm probably horrible at driving. I don't think I was ever great at driving, but I'd absolutely be horrible now. So those are 2-3 things right there.
Thank you for being so vulnerable, and I'm glad that there's no such thing as cooking while driving, because that would just be a complete disaster for you.
Oh, yeah.
So, man, if somebody made a movie of your life, the Efrem Epstein story,
gosh,
what would this be on? This would be on, let's make it a Netflix special. Who would play the title role of Efrem Epstein?
Who would play a title role of Efrem Epstein? I sometimes get told I look like Garth Brooks, so I'd be honored if he would play it.
I like that. I like.
Yeah.
That might be one of the first time Garth tried his hand at acting, but yeah.
Somebody else, and somebody else who I used to get told I look like. I may have to Google this, but I believe this person has a great story as well in terms of overcoming some struggles. If I'm remembering correctly, is a guy. Jog your memory. A guy named Mark Summers, who used to be, I think, the host of Double Dare or Family Double Dare. Let's check that out. Did he overcome a struggle? If so, I remember once upon a time a couple people said I looked like him. So maybe we'll get Mark Summers to play me. Third person I've somebody's been told I look like, and is it Richard Thomas, the guy who played John Boy on The Walton? So I remember he. I didn't watch The Waltons religiously, but I remember he was a good guy. So if he wanted to play me, that'd be cool too.
I think we'll have to figure out a way to get all of them in this movie. I think I want Garth to play you though. Because somehow Efrem Epstein becomes like this country singer who's got friends in low places, so that's kind of fun. All right, I think this is going to be our last question. If heaven exists, if it exists, what would you like to hear God say to you as you enter?
What would I like to hear God say to me as I enter? I'm proud of you.
I think we can bank on that. We're doing a lot of good in the world.
Let's see. Depends on the day. Depends on the day. I think there have been a couple of days recently where I'm not sure I made God proud, but it depends on the day. I keep trying to do my best.
Progress, not perfection. I like that. I like the answer. I'm proud of you. And that's kind of the end of the quickfire round. What do you think, man, the next 6 months to a year holds for you? Anything, personally, professionally, whatever you're comfortable sharing? What do you think's going down in your world, or what do you want to see happen?
I want to keep meeting new amazing people. I want to keep the amazing people in my life involved with my life. I'm very excited. I know you and I are advisors together of a mental health app called Elevator, and I'm now involved with a new startup called Walkthrough, and I know we've done some stuff on mental health and workplace together in the past. I'm hoping to do some stuff, even though it's a for-profit and it's not directly about mental health. We're all about mental health and workplace, and we're hoping to continue some initiatives over there. As mentioned earlier, I'm hoping to continue on the conversations on mental health and religion, mental health and Judaism and greater religion, as well as mental health and music, mental health and fitness, mental health in the workplace. These are all important conversations and conversations that I'm looking forward to be a part of. In terms of what's going on for me next week, something I'm very, very excited about. In addition to my concerts with my choir, I'm very, very excited that I am finally, I'm going to do this for my parents, going to see Dear Evan Hansen, which is really a show that sounds like was made for those of us in the mental health advocacy community. I've never met Ben Platt, but I know a number of people that do, and so that gives an extra layer of excitement there. And then my understanding is that our friend Desiree Stage gets a shout out, or maybe lived through this, gets a shout out in the playbill. And I believe you had Desiree on your podcast just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I'm Very excited for that. And you know what? I mean, I probably do have some micro goals, but one thing I've learned is that, it's good to have micro goals, but it's also good to basically just say, what can I do to every day take what I've learned from my past, both the good and the not so good, to give myself the best present possible. And so rather than saying I must climb Mountain X or I must do X number of these things, I really want to take this one. My goal is to continue taking this one day at a time and saying, okay, here's what I can do today. What great things from the past can I do to make it better, to make today the best day it can be. And you know what? I'll end this as well too. I really believe in the power of music. I'm hoping that music continues to play a role of lifting me and taking me to the best place I can be.
It's great to aspire to, and I think that's kind of what we should be doing every day. So I like that for you. And I like kind of what may be going on in the next 6 months to a year. Lots of exciting stuff. Excited for you for that Dear Evan Hansen. That's like one of the hottest tickets in town right now. Wish I was out in New York at the moment. Dude, so let me ask you this. So if people want to get in touch with you, follow your work, learn more about maybe Elijah's Journey or Elevator or anything really, is there a good way to do that, best way to do that, whether it's an email address, social media, website? Like what do you if that's even cool at all, how could people get in touch with you or find out more about what you got going on?
I really believe I'm the only Efrem Epstein on Facebook, so you can. That's a good way to try to reach out to me. I don't claim I'm on there 24/7, but you can try to reach me there. I'd say also if people get in touch with you, you usually are pretty much know how to track me down. So by all means, you can reach me through the I'm Possible. I assume you found this interview through the I'm Possible Project, and so. You send a note to the I'm Possible Project. Josh can usually find me pretty quickly.
True story. Cool, man. Well, that works for me. I'm happy to put people in touch with you. Efrem, this was really cool, man. I really enjoyed getting a chance to chat with you as always, and I'm really excited for our listeners to check out this episode. So thanks, brother, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Anytime.
You've been listening to the I'm Possible Project Show with Joshua Rivedal and guest Efrem Epstein. I love sharing stories and how to turn impossible into I'm Possible. If you want more inspirational stories, our second and third books are available right now. Changing Minds, Breaking Stigma, Achieving the Impossible, as well as Lemonade Stand. Both contain powerful stories of overcoming tremendous odds. When life gives you lemons, squeeze, add sugar, and pick up a copy of the I'm Possible Project. That's IAMPossibleProject.com/2/TWO or IAMPossibleProject.com/lemonade. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're more than a community. You're part of the I'm Possible family. Until next time, sending you lots of love.